you're welcome to the channel. Um, do you speak Spanish? Do you speak English? Do you speak whatever languages that you learn? Um, for most of us, especially we English speakers, I find that we tend to be a little bit reluctant and not perseverant when it comes to acquiring a second language, especially because English language is broadly spoken today, almost worldwide, and I say that out of experience because I was born in Nigeria, and when I compare the rate of francophones who are bilingual to the rates of anglophones who are bilingual, yeah, the gap is still there. It's not as large as it used to be in my younger years, but it's still there, you know. And it reminds me of Liberians who had to learn French because most of them had to flee to Cote d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast during the civil war that raped their country. And it's funny because they had to learn the language to survive. For those who know, I've never been to Cote d'Ivoire, but I know that they are one French country that don't play with their language, and they are said to speak, I think, one of the poorest French on the African continent, but I enjoy their French, I enjoy their accent, so I was told by some of my Liberian people that when they got to Cote d'Ivoire, their boys just didn't care that they only spoke English, and so they needed to buy food more than anything to eat, and so they were forced to learn and retain because if you have a need for something, you're gonna make it, come rain, come water, you have to survive. And so they started learning simple things like, and that's why it's funny that I started learning simple things like jupa, jule, foodstuffs were the first things that they had to start learning. And so that was for me the same thing here when I came to Ecuador to live, to settle with my husband. Foodstuff were the same first things that I started learning to memorize, because I could say hello, I could greet, answer a couple of questions, but after a couple of months, I wanted my own independence to be able to run my day-to-day affairs. Because what would happen at the beginning of our stay here was I would make a list for the household items we needed, and then the church that hosted us would give it to uh, somebody to go do the shopping for us. Now, that is not very, very nice if you're an adult, and you're used to doing things for yourself by yourself. So I simply had to start learning um, words, So I learned a lot of vegetables, grocery lists I had to memorize. And then when I went to the supermarket, I would go with my phone. It had a diary, a dictionary rather, on it. So I will stand on the aisle and I'll be looking at translating. Fortunately, it could work without data. So I would look for something that would buy maybe like oats, Quaker oats. So I would write Quaker oats and it will tell me. Or I would see something, even though the picture looked clear, just not to buy something wrong, it will say, okay, no, XYZ, and then it will translate. And that was how I started learning Spanish. That was how my Spanish language uh, acquisition began because I needed it to survive. And I find that very, very primordial that at a point in time in your language acquisition, it really has to become something you're passionate about or something you need. If there is too much passivity or lack of interest at a point in time, that course or that language dies. Staying in Ecuador also has meant that I've had to teach English to Spanish speakers as soon as I could speak in Spanish. And one of the things that I learned, which was quite strange, was the fact that a lot of my students attended academies, language academies. There are lots of them here today when I came, and they still exist. But I think with the development of applications, language applications, people are rather going preferring to learn online, you know. But I noticed that a lot of these people who went to the language academy, la academia, to learn English basically couldn't speak. They weren't speaking. Even those at secondary school level, they would come to me with assignments, and I always wondered why couldn't they approach their teachers and say, Miss, I didn't understand what you taught. Could you explain or could you help me out? You know, and a lot of them still come because they have an exam at hand. And this is what teaching has taught me here is that we don't practice the language on a daily basis, right? We don't practice, or the teacher does not practice with the student. I try to make my students to begin to speak almost immediately. Like if I take you as an English student, the first thing I do is for you to be able to greet me within the next week. You should be able to greet me in English already. That's what I do. And that helps them to, first of all, take away the nervousness of speaking. That takes away the fear of making mistakes. That takes the fear of not pronouncing right. So I try to break the obstacle by kind of throwing them in the water immediately we start class, right? And so I've applied that to myself. When I began to speak Spanish and learn it by myself at home, I never went to an academic, language academy or language class. I learned Spanish on YouTube, and thanks to the people that I surround myself with here in Ecuador. And I realized, oh, but if I can learn that, then I can learn any other language. And so I went back to my first language, which is French, because they come from the same family. And a lot of things I was learning in Spanish was reminding me of my French. I don't know if it makes sense because I stopped speaking French for a very long time. So Spanish came to wake up my French memory, you know. And then I began to realize there were a lot of realizations. And for me, it was also something emotional, you know, that why would I learn a language which is not my heritage when French, that is my heritage, I don't speak it better? So I started taking it. And then I've been passionate about Italian. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to learn all those languages. And I've been teaching myself. There are so many courses, and with the advent of artificial intelligence, it has been very easy to create courses to evaluate myself. Basically, that is what I use AI for now in my language study. I had seen videos or a video or two, yes, a couple of videos on YouTube about students, self-taught students who use ChatGPT or whatever AI app to help themselves at home. Because when you're self-taught, the problem becomes evaluation, you know. So that's what I use for that. And so with the language that I had most difficulty with was Italian because I didn't have anybody to practice with more than anything. And so it was difficult to put into practice all the grammar rules because I wasn't speaking. So what I did was I started another channel and I started speaking in Italian. I would basically plan out my day-to-day activities. I would vlog, maybe walk into the mall and start, you know, trying to practice what I had learned. And that helped me. However, there were certain grammatical aspects, you know, or conjugations that I couldn't bring to life. And I will use Spanish for this part of the video. So with Spanish, what happened was there I could master almost all the tenses. I mastered present, past, future, conditional, and then when we got to the subjunctive, it was a complete roadblock. You know, it was a complete roadblock for the fact that it didn't really exist in the language that I spoke naturally, which is English, in the sense that when we use that tense, when we use that mood rather, because it's not a tense, it's a mood, in the subjunctive mood in English, it doesn't really change. And so for native speakers like myself, we don't even realize that it is a subjunctive mood. But in Romance languages, it is very, very clear, the conjugation basically changes, So I struggled with that. First of all, I didn't even understand the concept. I just knew when to use it and I memorized it. So it was weird, do, wishes, expectations, intentions, reasoning, doubts, and I forgot what O is now. But it was just here. So when I started learning Italian, I didn't bother to struggle a lot with it. I will just avoid it. Unknown to me that even if I didn't want to use the K to bring in the subjunctive, I would still have to make a hypothesis. So we call them the hypothetical situations. And in Italian, the hypothetical situation always uses a conjunctive tense, either mostly the imperfect tense, you know, and it was very difficult. So I had, at a point in time, I'd mastered the present tense subjunctive, and I continued going. And then this year, I found myself speaking more fluently, less stammering, longer sentences, adopting more connectors, more conjunctions, and that is how you know that you're going. But what I realized of recent was I was now at sea level, meaning I was doing sea level classes. I was taking sea level classes or consuming videos that was created for level C1, C2 students. And by that I mean advanced level videos. When you are on YouTube, most language tutors will tell you this level is for beginners or for intermediate or it's advanced level. So if you're here, just know why you're not good. But the language was flowing, and it was not one, it was not two. There were difficult videos that began to make sense, that was easier to assimilate. And I said, wow, what is happening? And when did I begin to do advanced classes? If you do exercises, what I'm saying will make sense to you. You know how you land on a workout video and it says for advanced level, and then you just go in there and you're working out and you begin to modify because really your body is not strong enough for that. That is what happened with me. After years and years of dedication and hard work, everything is finally coming together. And I thought, wow, this house that I've been building, the house of a multilingual person or a polyglot, dare I say. I think I can now use the word polyglot for myself, is coming together. The foundation, the walls, which is the stagnation place, where you just put in brick upon brick upon brick upon brick because you've put, sorry for the noise, people are hawking outside my house, brick upon brick. And what it has done is, while the languages I'm learning, I'm getting better at it, it is beginning to help me see also some little faults here that needs to be polished. Say, for example, I'm back to taking courses now in Spanish because for a long time I've not done any practice in Spanish. I just abandoned it, and I find myself, because I work a lot with Spanish, I find myself like, okay, now it's time to go back and do something better. The desire just comes naturally, because now you are at the wall phase. You are just putting brick upon bricks, and you now know how to, if you've seen where they build a house, you know how to apply cement and put a brick on the cement and put a brick. The wall building is getting better. We've turned cornerstones, we've turned the corner, it took a lot of time, and so I wanted to come here to encourage the people who are self-taught language learners like myself, especially if you are a Spanish-speaking person trying to learn English, and you think it's too difficult. A lot of people always tell me English is difficult. English is difficult, whereas Spanish actually is more difficult than English language. It's one of the most difficult languages to speak. Uh, it doesn't happen overnight. There is no language that happens overnight. There is absolutely nothing that happens overnight. That is the purpose of this video, is to tell you that whether you are working out, trying to lose weight, or eat healthy, or go to school, acquire a degree, raise babies, anything, personal development, there's nothing difficult. At a point in time, you just get used to the struggle. You get used to the struggle phase because you're like a builder who finally has put the foundation, and you can see the walls of your house going up. That is what learning is all about. You pass through that difficult phase, and you can see the house going up. And then you can get to the roofing part. And once the house is roofed, painted, plastered, painted, furnished, you can sit down and say, okay, now I got a shelter in my house. That is the point where you can easily wake up and speak in English or speak in whatever language it is that you are doing. If you're working out, that is the point where the alarm goes off and you don't snooze. It has become part of you. And I think science has found out that if you continue doing something for over 30 days, it becomes a part of you. For me, I struggled with living an active lifestyle. And now I know I can't go 48 hours without working out. And I'm also getting to that point now where I have to practice every day. At least I give each language that I'm learning 15 to 20 minutes. And if it's not an active learning, maybe because I worked out or because I have some other things to do, I do passive learning. I just put on a podcast or a short story, listening practice story. And while I'm listening, I try to work my brain to find out what tense are they speaking in. Do I know the meaning of that word? Can I translate the word into Spanish? Because a lot of times too, we still think in our native language, and I always do that. I think probably because I work as an interpreter, so I just listen passively and I say, okay, they said X, Y, Z. How would I say that in English? What would be the proper translation in English? And vice versa, because sometimes you can understand because you have trained yourself so much in the language, you can get the gist of what the video is talking about or the podcast, but you cannot tell the next person exactly what you are hearing. And so, what I do is not to use subtitles. So I just try to be able to put what I'm listening to say, okay, I translate in my head to say, oh, okay, this, that. And I say, for example, comía cuando vino, había comido, comeré mañana. And so when you hear the word comer, because you know the word comer, and then you can say, okay, that is comer. Or for example, they say dormiría, dormiera, and then I'm like, okay, can I get the infinitive tense of that language, of that word? I know dormiera is imperfect subjunctive, dormiría is the conditional, or what is the root word? I kind of call it like a kind of mathematics to say, okay, if we remove iria and put re, dormire, future tense, things like that, and you play with words. That's how I do passive learning, just by listening to a video or a podcast or short story. You can do that also with movies, but I think with movies, what happens is while you're entertained and you can follow the story, it helps your listening skills. um, Personally, I've gotten to the place where it distracts me because I want to now filter each expression to say, okay, for example, the expression, my favorite expression in Spanish, no me paro bola. And then I want to say, okay, no me paro bola, how would I say that in English? And look for an English equivalent. Then I want to look for it in Italian, then I want to look for it in French, and I lose track of the movie because I'm always uh, learning unconditionally. And so that is why I wanted to do this video for you to say, you know what, give yourself time, keep practicing, keep doing whatever it is that gives you passion, that you're passionate about. If you can find a way that works for you, good. If not, you'll get there. You'll get used to the struggle, and the more you practice, the easier it becomes to do that. And so, yes, guys, someone was asking me the other day, so you can speak Italian fluently? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can travel to Italy by myself now. I'm at that point where I think I'll be able to do that. Probably not speak as formally, maybe in an office, but I think at the airport I should be able to find my way around the airport. So yeah, that is all I wanted to say. The the journey is getting more beautiful. The vision is clearer. There is a pattern now, and I hope you find that in your language learning, whether you're learning at an academy, whether you're learning by yourself at home. I hope you finally get to the rooftop of your house. I hope you enjoy the fruits of your labor. Thank you very much. And it is not too much, even though there's nobody right now, there's zero viewers as I'm talking. But please do consider subscribing and liking the video. It will help me a lot to grow the channel. Thank you. Bye bye.